If you're thinking of applying for grants to fund part of your nonprofit organization's efforts, what are the typical components of a grant application that you might encounter? That's what I'm going to go through in this video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber Melanie Smith, and I'm a nonprofit founder and executive director of the nonprofit that I started. I've written quite a few grants in my time in the nonprofit world, for better or worse. Win some, you lose some, and I'm excited to share some of the things that I've picked up from that experience. So I hope that you find this video helpful and useful, and if you do, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. I also have some resources on my website, foundertofulltime.com, including a couple of online trainings, one of which is all about fundraising, and I go into a lot greater detail about grant writing in there too. So check that out. So I've covered a bit about grants and grant writing in some of my other videos, including what types of grants exist out there for nonprofits and some of the things you might need to prepare before you can start writing grants or being competitive for grants. So I encourage you to check out some of those other videos, and I have a whole playlist just about grant writing. So hopefully those will all help you out. But in this video, I want to go back to the basics. I want to talk you through some of the most common components of a typical grant application or proposal that you might encounter. And I will say, if you can take the time to think about your answers or how you would respond to each of these typical sections of a grant proposal early on, you're going to have a lot smoother and easier grant writing experience. So I hope that you kind of think to yourself as I go through these, how would my organization or I answer this particular section? And just start brainstorming that in advance and writing down in your notes as you think of things. All right, so let's get right into these. I'm going to go through about 14 components and just briefly explain what they are. Component number one is something you are likely to encounter before you even start writing the actual application or proposal portion of the grant, and that is an eligibility quiz. The idea here is that funders want to essentially screen out those organizations who they already know are not going to be eligible for applying for a grant with their organization. So in an eligibility quiz, you might encounter such questions as, what geography do you serve? Do you have your tax exempt registration officially filed with your government? What populations do you serve? What is your budget size? Sometimes foundations or grant funders only want to support organizations of a particular geographical region or of a particular budget size, or who serves a particular target population. So this is their way of screening you out, or if you pass, knowing that you're likely to be a decent fit for their funding opportunity. The second component is, of course, the application itself and all of the pieces of that. Most funders that I encounter these days do have online applications. I still come across the occasional old school, write a grant proposal in a Word doc and mail it in, but that's very rare these days. I would highly recommend, though, even if you're doing an application online, that you do write your answers to the grant questions in a separate document so that you can save them in case you need to edit them or collaborate with other team members before submitting it on an online application. And sometimes those online applications do not save your drafts for you, so you need to have a safe place where you can do that. The third component is just your organization basics. Things like the name of your organization, of course, the organization's mission, perhaps the year it was founded, your organization's website URL, perhaps even a little bit of organizational history here, major milestones over the past couple of years if you are an organization that has been around for a couple of years, etc. The fourth component is the need statement, and this is a very, very important part of your grant application. The funders want to know what need in the community or in your geographical service area is your organization meeting or filling through its programs, presumably the same programs that you are seeking funding support for. And funders are looking for you to back all of this up in your needs statement with well done research and citing your sources. So it's going to ask you questions like, how many people are affected by the particular issue area that you're tackling? Let's say that your organization is tackling hunger or food insecurity. So how many people in your region are impacted by hunger and food insecurity? Who is impacted? How deeply are they affected by this problem? And what are the statistics and the data proving that this is the problem at the scale that you describe it in your proposal? The fifth component is something I alluded to a little bit earlier, and that is your organization or program's target audience. This is basically, who does your organization serve? Is it children? Is it animals? Is it particular areas of the earth? Is it a particular age range or group of people? Is it just women? What are the demographics of the target population that your organization serves through its programs that are seeking funding? In the sixth component of a typical grant proposal, and by the way, these are not in order, so I'm just saying it's sixth on my list. You're going to be putting forth the description of your program or services. So we spent a little bit of time in the other areas of the application talking about the community need and the target population. Well, in this program or project description, you're now talking about how you're meeting those needs. So here you want to provide a description of your programs. What activities does your program undertake in order to meet the outcomes that you desire for serving the people that you want to serve? So what are the goals of the program, and how are you meeting those goals day to day? The seventh thing on my list is, of course, the amount of funding that you're requesting from that funder. So what is the actual dollar amount you are asking that funder for? And I will give you a little bit of advice here. Funders typically want to obviously know how much you're asking for from them, but they also want to know how much you have already secured or are seeking from other funders as well. And the reason is that it's very rare that a funder will want to provide all of the funding you need for a program or your organization. They want to know that you have buy-in from other community supporters. So probably it would not be advisable to ask for more than 20 to 30%, and I'm just throwing out a number that sounds right to me, 20 to 30% of your program's total budget from a single funder. So just be thinking about that as you go to apply for grants, considering who else you're going to ask for contributions in order to piece together the total amount that you need, understanding that a single funder is not going to most likely want to or be able to provide 100% of everything you need. Eighth is your goal, outputs, and outcomes. So this gets to the heart of the question of, if you got this funding, how many people or whomever's in your target audience would you be able to effectively serve during the grant period, usually a year or a couple of years? So they want to know the outputs, which is the resulting products or services from your activities. And then they want to know the outcomes, which is the actual change that has occurred in the lives of the people you're serving. So take the example of homelessness. An output might be the number of people that your organization placed in affordable housing. That's something you've done in the short term, but the long-term outcome might be something like, what percent of those people actually stayed out of the cycle of homelessness 5 years later? So the funder wants to know what are those short-term outputs and those long-term outcomes so that they can see your vision for tackling your problem that your organization is tackling over the long term. Ninth is the timeline of your program or project. How long do you expect the program to take? If it's ongoing, then what does an example timeline look like for that particular year? So what are the activities you're undertaking in the months of March and April, and then in June through the summer, etc.? What does a typical year look like for your organization and the program being funded? 10th is, how are you going to measure success for your program? We talked about outputs and outcomes and how those are important, but what are the actual tools and strategies you're going to use to measure whether or not you have met those goals, those outputs, and those outcomes? Will it be focus groups? Will it be surveys? Will it be tracking the data of the people that you have served? You need to describe in this section your actual methods for determining whether you have met your goals. 11th is partnerships and collaborations. A lot of organizations who are providing grants love to see collaboration between organizations. So in a section like this, the funder is looking for you to say whether you have partners in that particular program, who those partners are, and then describe why those organizations are the ideal partners for the initiative. And it can sometimes be other nonprofits or businesses, government agencies, etc. 12th is your current annually approved budget. So funders want to see a copy of your organization's budget for that year, and they're talking about the version of the budget that has been approved by a vote of your board of directors. So this is the official budget for your organization. 13th is past financial records. So a funder might ask to see past tax forms in the United States. This might be the Form 990 that you would file for your organization each year, or a past audit. The goal here is that the funder wants to make sure that your organization has sound financial practices and that they're able to make sure that you do by looking at your records. The 14th component is just the extras. A couple of other things that funders might ask for could include your list of board members. It could include copies of some of the policies that your organization has, like a conflict of interest policy or an anti-discrimination policy. They just want to see more about the infrastructure and the strength of your organization's systems and operations in some of these extras that you might encounter. Whew, okay, it can feel like a lot, I know, but if you can plan for these sections in advance, like I mentioned before, you're gonna feel way more prepared and be able to get through grant applications a lot more smoothly. So I really hope that this sort of overview of just some of the things you might encounter has been helpful for you. So now I want to hear from you. Are you thinking of applying for a grant? Which sections that I just talked about feel like they might end up being the hardest for you or the easiest? I'd love to kind of hear your feedback, so be sure to share in the comments below. And as I mentioned before, if you are starting a nonprofit or trying to develop your fundraising plan, check out my website, foundertofulltime.com, for some resources. I hope those will help you out. Finally, I have a newsletter for nonprofit leaders and change makers. I send out resources and thoughts and ideas every month. The link to subscribe to that if you're interested is in the comments below as well. And check out my Facebook group, Change the World or Bust. We've got a couple thousand folks in there from all around the world who are passionate about making an impact, talking about their journeys and what they're working on. So come join us there. I hope that you found this helpful. Once again, I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.